Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you some advanced features that are available in Bambu Studio, and probably it's also available in some other printers too. So I'm not claiming that this only belongs to Bambu Studio, but since this is the new printer that I'm working with, while still working with other printers we have, I found it has some interesting features in the slicer software, so I wanted to show them to you. So the first one that you know is some of the Bambu printers, they have this multi-material head called the AMS. And if your printer has those, then you can basically synchronize here all of the material that you have and all of the colors with that AMS, and then you can print multicolor, right? So that's the probably the most interesting thing I would say, but there are lots of more interesting things. So here you can basically go ahead and remove all of the spools, or if you can add them, right? Add as many as you want, and then say what material it is and click here to edit and edit everything about it. Or you can click here on this button and say synchronize it with the AMS. And as soon as you do that here, the AMS I have has 4 filaments in it, and one of them is orange, one of them is blue, one of them is green, and one of them is a support material. So you see, automatically it synchronizes with that, okay? Because I set it on the hardware, and now here all it needs is one connection, especially because now I'm logged into my account and I have connection remotely to my printer. So now let me show you the multicolor. So here, if I bring anything, right? So let's say, for instance, I bring this balloon dog, and let's scale it up a little bit. So maybe 10 times bigger. And then maybe just rotate it a little bit. So here, I want to print this part, right? So I can pick this and then go here to this option, color painting. And then it gives me different options for painting that. Okay, so I can do gap fill, height range, triangle, sphere, and circle. So these are for like grabbing a marker or some painter and then paint over it, right? So let's say I want some parts to be blue, right? And then I can go ahead and here simply paint all over the part. Now the problem is you can never get to observe all of the boundaries. So let's say I just want this nose and this head part to be blue, but when I get close to the ears, right, I cannot exactly go perfect, and there is a chance of my hand slipping a little bit, and then I go over the next part. So instead of that, the better way to do it is to use this fill command. This fill command basically goes over one closed area. So look here, boom, right? Very beautiful. I want this, here we go. I want that inner part, here we go. You see? So this is really great. And I can do similar thing for, let's say, these two, and maybe this one and this one, and the rest of it, maybe I wanted orange, okay? So this is a really powerful tool. And let me tell you that if you do this and you slice it, you're gonna see something that you don't see when it's unicolor. So let me show you here. Now, of course, here I did not put support. That's why it gave me that warning. So it's always good to go under support, and by default, it's not active in Bambu. So you say, hey, enable support for me, okay? So make sure it doesn't have any dangling parts, because those are too long for a bridge. There we go. And typically the default support in it is the tree shape, which we can change, and I'll show you. But the thing that you see is this guy here. This is the basically purging tower. And you need that when you want to constantly change color, because here, look, you go from one color to the next to the next. So you clearly need to have a purging tower so that it can purge the remaining of the previous color and it can switch to the new color, okay? But if I go back here to this guy, and let's see if I can clean it up. There we go. And now let me slice it again. There we go. You see? No purging tower. Because it's all single color orange in this case, I assume. That is my first spool. And so that really helps save a lot of material. So unless you really want to do it multicolor, then don't go for it, because you are wasting a lot of material in that purge tower, right? So just this is about printing it multicolor. Now, let me show you one other thing before we move on any further. So if I go to device here, right? And then if I click on this button here, look, here it has some AMS setting. So that is another thing that is very important. And these two are by default are not active, but I recommend you do it. So one of them checks and make sure that if you run out of one filament, it automatically starts using the other filament and don't stop. Now, this is if you don't care about the color, or if they're all the same color, right? So you can have 4 spools of the same color. So if you have a big print and mid print you lose all of the filament or half of it or something, it can continue. So this is a good thing, or it could be a bad thing depending on, again, whether you care about color or not. The other one is this is really good. It estimates how much of the material is left, and it can give you a warning. Okay, so I typically turn those two on unless, again, I really want to know about color. And of course, you have always a remote access to your printer. So you see here, right now, it is showing me the basically the system, and you can clearly see that the print is done and it was successful and everything. And again, it is showing you here those remaining material that I have. Okay, and you know, a Bambu printer has also a room for one external spool. You can also do that one as well, and you can do all sorts of controls here. Another interesting thing it has is under calibration. And not only it does the automatic bed leveling, it can also do some vibration compensation, which is really good, okay? So if the foundation is not very hard, or if the speed, especially we talk about it, if the speed, which is here, if you put it on high speed, then you can have some vibration, so it tries to compensate as much as possible. And you know, one of the big advantages of Bambu is the high speed of the printing, okay? So it has 500 mils per second, but it can go higher than that, a lot higher than that. So Bambu is one of the first printers that could really do the printers very fast. So these are two of the items. Now let's go to the next one. So the next one is about seam. So let's talk about seam. And you might have seen it here and there, but I just want to explain the seam for you. So what is seam? So look here. If you look, you can see this kind of white track here. What is this? These are where each layer starts or ends, and the next layer starts. This is where your extruder stops and then goes to the next layer, goes around, comes back, goes around, comes back. And typically this seam in physical prints, it is going to cause some physical gap or physical basically small extrusion out of the part, which you can, of course, if it's extrusion out of the part, you can just probably cut it out with a knife or something, or a sharp tool. But if it's a gap in the part, that is not going to be pleasant, right? So let me show you a seam in 3D print. So you physically see that. I don't want to grab one here right now, but let me just show you here. So this is one, right? You can see here, that is the line, okay? And this is where each layer finished and the next layer started. Sometimes it might look like a gap here. Typically it's not, but sometimes it might be like a gap, okay? So this is a seam. Now, what would you do about the seam? So one of the things that people typically do, because you have to stop and go to the next layer, there is no way around it. One of the things people do is they try to hide it somewhere that there is an edge by itself, or they try to hide it inside or underneath or somewhere that you don't see well. So they try to keep it out of the view as much as possible, okay? So that is one way to get rid of it. And here in the software, that part is called seam painting. So if I go back, look here, that's this command here, seam painting, right? So you just saw what my seam was here, right? So the seam here is on this side, but maybe I want to go and put it here somewhere a little bit interior that you don't see, as opposed to right up there. So here I can go and say, hey, I want to do a seam painting. And when it comes to that region, so let me, for instance, put it maybe down here. So anything in that region, if possible, put it there for me, right? So let's do it. There we go. You see, it was here. Now look at it. Now on this leg, it moved it down here for me. Okay, so you can move the seams around and that will update the G code. So it's a good idea to move the seams as much as possible out of the exterior part of the object and move it inside, or the parts that you don't see. That's one thing you can do for seaming. The other thing that I want to talk about, and this is really more interesting to me, is what we call the scarf. So using the scarf to basically not eliminate but minimize the appearance of the seam. So what is that one? So here, if we go and talk about quality, look, so if we go down, let me show you. There we go. You see, so seam position aligned, which means put them all aligned with each other. One of the things that might come to some people's mind is, hey, instead of this aligned, let's make it random, right? If we make it random, then those white spots are going to be all over the place like this, and that might not be as visible. Well, sometimes it might not, but actually sometimes it could make it a lot worse. So seam 3D print, let's see if I can show you one picture. Random seam, that sometimes is actually much worse. Look at that. Do you see it here? Yeah, look at all these points. You see, they're all over the place. So if it was one line like this, I would probably grab something and cut it. But if it's all over the place like that, that's absolutely not a good idea. So I do not recommend you use a random seam, okay? It's always better to be aligned, okay? Aligned is much, much better. But as I said, there is this technique that you can see is called scarf, and scarf, smart scarf seam application. This is a really interesting thing. So what is this? So the way that the scarf is done, instead of this endpoint here, and then the next endpoint right above it, and the next endpoint right above it, and so on, what it typically does, instead of putting them all above each other, it tries to do it kind of diagonally. What does that mean? It means that instead of we make the gap between two parts to be a straight line, we kind of make it, as I said, diagonal like this, okay? And typically in woodworking, this is the thing that they use, and they use it to reinforce the part and the joints and the connections, right? There are all sorts of different shapes of it. But the good thing about going diagonal when you create a seam is it makes it less visible. So if you look at this website here, look, this is a conventional seam, and then these are the scarf seams, where it might not be easy to see, but basically they are traveling, so these points are not exactly below each other. So one point is a little bit diagonal above or below the next one, and then it goes and continues underneath that and then keeps going. So it's kind of a zigzag going from one seam point to the next, and that will eliminate to a good extent the appearance. It's still there, but it's not easy for us to see because of that zigzagging and that diagonal seam pattern. So it is gonna really minimize the appearance of that. So this seam and scarf are two of my favorite things. Yet even another better one, which I really love, is ironing. So what is ironing? So here, if you look at the top features, when you have top surfaces like this and there is the gentle slope, the problem is you're going to see this kind of bad quality of the surface. You clearly see here that the surface quality is very poor. Now, one of the things you can do is ironing. What is ironing? So the hot end comes at the top of a top layer, and then what it does, it tries to reheat that top layer and then kind of spreads the plastic a little bit better. Sometimes it extrude a little bit on the top of that and kind of make it a lot smoother. So if you want your top layer to look a lot better, my recommendation is you go with the ironing option. So look here, typically the ironing option is not available, but if you want, go ahead and say, hey, I want you to iron the top surfaces for me, and look here. Now look, so it kind of, you see, it kind of fills it for you a little bit and add a little bit extra extrusion on it. So now if you look at these, to me, they are far better looking than what you had. And you can see that over here too. If I show you ironing, in 3D print, you can see the difference. Look at these two. Right? You clearly can see that. This is a regular one, and this is with ironing on the top of that, and you can see that the surface is much, much smoother. So if you want to get better qualities, now this might be an exaggeration, but this is relatively better, and as I said, this is a really good one. So ironing can clearly make your top surface quality much better. So that's another thing that I suggest you do, is to use the ironing feature in addition to the scarf, which the scarf is automatically checked in Bambu, but ironing is not. Okay, now one thing that you can do, which is kind of exactly the opposite of ironing, is called fuzzy skin. Fuzzy skin basically ruins the nice surface and make it fuzzy, as the name says. And it should be, I guess, under others, right? Let's see. It was under others. Yeah. You see fuzzy skin. So right now it tries to make the surface nice. But if you say, I want fuzzy on the contour, maybe, look what happens to the surface. So basically makes the surface a little bit rough. And for some prints, it might be aesthetic, but for some others, clearly not. I mean, look, this is what you get. Okay, so it doesn't perfectly follow the contour, has a little bit ups and downs, and you get something like this. Again, for some people, if they want to make something artistic, they might think this is really a cool thing to make it like this. But I personally prefer straight lines and following the contour exactly. But this is another thing that might make it interesting or not interesting, depending on whether you want to add artificial texture to it or not. Then you can use this fuzzy skin. Okay, two other things that I really love about it is, if we go here, one of them is this guy, variable layer height. So typically when you print in the quality part right here, you pick a layer height. And it stays for that number for the rest of the print. But if you want, you can make it variable. So right now, if you look at the layers, let me slice it again. If you look at the right-hand side, which shows the layers, and you can basically move between the layers by that slider, you can see that, look, the layers are all the same height, correct? So look here, when I go through the layers, you see they are all the same height. But if you want, you can go here and say, well, no, I want you to make it adaptive. And what does adaptive do? So now you see some layers are basically, if you look, some layers are much thinner, some layers are rather thicker. So it depends on the curvature of the part and how fast the curvature is moving. You can basically make it adaptive. So now look at this kind of curve that you see on the right side. look, it shows you the layer height. So here is 0.1, 0.28, and then here 0.28. You see, all the way 0.28. But here in this region, you're down to 0.08. Okay, so you can make it adaptive, and or you can make it smooth. So if you look at the smooth now, look, the transition is relatively smooth. You can do that if you want. You can move this slider to the left and right to change the trade-off between quality and speed. So if you want more quality, then you bring it more to this side and make it adaptive. So now it tries to make the better quality and not caring too much about the speed, still making it adaptive. And you can have some minimum, right? And then if you don't like it, you can reset it. So this is adaptive layer height, but that's not the only one. Another thing you can do is adaptive line width. This is very also interesting. By the way, you know, adaptive layer height, you can do it through hardware by how much your z-axis is moving up and down and using your stepper motors. But for adaptive line width, which is your resolution in the X and Y direction, as opposed to this guy, which is your Z resolution, the X and Y resolution here, you see the default is about 0.42, which is almost the same as the nozzle, which is 0.4. But you know, if you change the flow rate and if you change the speed of the motion of the hot end, you can change the thickness of the plastic that is coming out of the nozzle. Typically, the slower the nozzle moves or the more the flow rate is, you're going to get thicker lines, and the faster the nozzle moves and the smaller the flow rate, you get thinner lines. So if you want, you can change the line width right now, right? So if I show you this, take a look. Right now, if I use the bottom slider, you can see the thickness in the X and Y in each layer, right? So let me move this out of the way. And if we go look, so here is moving on each layer, right? Let me move out so you can see better. Bring this guy out. So, okay, that's the thickness of what you can see, right? But if, let's say, can I make it, I don't know, 0.21 or 0.20 or something, okay, and slice it again. Now I'm forcing it to go with thinner lines in the XY resolution, okay? So I can do that as well, which is, of course, now you have to have thinner lines. So probably you can see, I don't know if you can compare against last time, but your lines are a little bit thinner this time. And again, you can control this as well, which is a great feature. By the way, remember I showed you that the support is a tree here, right? But if you want, you can change the shape of the support. So you just need to go to the support and you see the type is tree. If you want to do it like the other printers that typically do is a normal, right? So you can do also a normal support, right? So you can do that as well. Let's see. There we go. You see, typically this uses more material and is harder to separate. Tree is the better kind of support. It is much easier to separate, and it is typically using smaller amount of material because it's not going all over the place. In the bottom, it starts as a 3, and when it reaches there, it kind of expands and covers all of the weight. And so the weight is supported by this trunk. So this is a very smart method of support material. Again, much easier to clean, and it's going to leave a lot less scars on the part, as well as using a lot less material. Okay, and of course you have the things for the raft here, right? You have the raft command, so you can do raft. If you want to do skirt, it's also here. You can do skirt, right? So everything is here. There is brim here. And then under strength, of course, you have the infill percentage, and you have the infill pattern and everything here, right? And the shells or the number of walls. So let's move on. The next thing I want to show you is adding some kind of logo or trademark on the part, right? So let's say I want to go on some surface. Now for that, I would rather use a different object, which is kind of more flat than this one. So something like this, okay? And let's say I want to put my name or something on this face, right? So I pick this and then I go to this TA, and here it is allowing me to type whatever I want. So let's say I want some font, and then I want the font to be 12 and the thickness maybe 2 mils, and then what text I want: Engineering Educator Academy, EEA, and it is good to start at the surface, and I can make some small gaps or something. So if I click here, it should show me a preview of the text, right? And you see here, that's the bad place that I clicked, right? If you don't like it, you can start in another place, right? So that's where I click. But if I clicked a little bit more to the left, then I should have had that feature more on the left side, right? So I'm doing it again, and I'm being a little bit patient because I want to show you, right? So again, maybe this is too big. So if you're a little bit patient, it should show you the preview of it, so you exactly know where you're plugging it. So let's say I want it right here, and I click and I OK that, and now look, here I have this basically emboss that you have on the part, the emboss, and that is going to be a part of your print. So if I slice it, that is going to be a part of my print, as you can see. And so I can add my logo at the very last second. So this is really beautiful. Okay, what else? So by the way, you didn't need to do Control Z. You could just go here. You go under Objects instead of Global Setting. You go under Objects, and this is the guy. So you can simply delete it, right? If you don't like it. Now, if there is, by the way, you can also support several plates. So something can go outside the plate, and you can bring it to the other place, and so on. So that's why you see outside here. Now, one of the things you can do is the cut, okay? And I like cut as well very much. So sometimes you have a part, and either this part is too big, or the surface that you want to put it on the object is not really flat. Let's see. I don't think I have a great option, but let's see if I have this part. So this part is not super bad, but if the bottom of it was also curved, one thing I can do is to go here and then say I want to cut this guy with this tool. Okay, and here I can move my cutting plate wherever I want to cut. Okay, and when the cuts position and orientation, you see you can rotate this plane, you can move it up and down, left and right. Once you're good, and perform the cut, and there we go, you see? So now this part is flat and that part is flat. So now you can go here and say, hey, well, for this guy, I want you to basically lay this surface on the print bed for me, this one. There we go, right? So now you can have flat surfaces and you can do a lot better. Now, of course, it's a good idea if you could have tabs in them and holes so you can easily glue them together. But if the part's strength is not super important and you're great with gluing them together, maybe this is the way to increase the flat areas, and maybe to make a big part that doesn't fit on the print bed, make it in two pieces so it does fit on the print bed, or you do each part of it separate. Okay, the last part that I want to show you is the Boolean operation. So let's say you have these two parts and you want to, I don't know, perform intersection, union, subtraction, or anything. And these are two mesh files. So you bring them in, and just by highlighting them, this command here, which is mesh Boolean, is not going to work. You see, it says right click to assemble these objects. So when you highlight them, you right click and say merge. And when you merge them, now they become an assembly. Now inside the assembly, you're allowed to perform whatever you want. But in this case, well, they have no intersection or anything. So before I do the assembly, maybe it's a good idea to at least bring them closer so they have something together, right? So I don't know, something like this, correct? So now that I have these two, then I can, for instance, go ahead and do merging. And now I'm gonna click here and say I want a union of them. So pick this and with this and then do union. And you see now, instead of having two separate objects, you only have one object, which is this assembly. So if you slice it, this is only a single part right now. It's not two separate parts, right? You see, it's a merged part together. Okay, and you can do the other two operations as well. So these are the major commands that I wanted to show you here, which are really interesting. I really loved each and every one of them. And I wanted to add this video to my playlist for 3D printing so you know about the new features of the printer Bambu Lab. And thank you so much for your attention. I'll see you in the next video.